Hello, this is the year of being 70. Hello, Lucy McCarrer, daughter of one of my mother's best friends throughout life. And that's how we met. I'm Lisette Schuitenmaker. I'm based in Amsterdam, and Lucy is in Norfolk. And we speak about our life.
Yes, our long lives, our 70 years of existence. And we kind of pick and choose what we're going to talk about on each episode. And this episode, we are going to talk about the last 5 years of our 40s, which happens to coincide with the first 4 or 5 years of the 21st century. So, Lisette, where were you when the midnight sounded at the end of 1999?
Nine. Whoa. Yay. I was actually at a dinner party that friends of ours were throwing, and their children, they'd each of them, so the parents and the children had all invited people. So it was a multi-generational thing. And we all had tasks and went into the kitchen and we're wearing this apron that we still have. It's very washed now, which says the Last Supper.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
Because there was a sense of, it's all going well. At the turn of the millennial, will all the computers stop and we'll just be disconnected from
Yeah,
everything.
we really didn't know what was going to happen, did we?
No.
Everybody had to do some sort of compliance, companies, businesses, anybody who had a computer had to do some kind of, I have no idea what, but sort of updates and putting things in place because there was this belief that when the kind of global clock ticked round to the year 2000, somehow everything would reset on our computers and either disappear or explode or we'd lose all our data. Nobody seemed to know what would happen. So there was a lot of very probably well-paid work for computer consultants. So Richard, my husband,
And
was
maybe they
involved.
saved us. Who
Yes,
knows?
yes, maybe that was it. Yes, I mean, I don't think we'll ever know whether it would have happened, whether it was completely unnecessary and kind of weird sort of millennialism, or whether, yeah, we did actually save ourselves by, or the IT guys saved
But
us.
it was like this sense of, you know, I mean, counting the years is all made up, right? We could have
Yeah.
been in a completely different way of counting the years. But since it was, turning 1999 to 2000, it felt like we were witnessing something.
Yeah, yes, it did. It did feel quite portentous, and also, as we talked about last week, or I certainly said that there was a good feeling certainly in the UK, and I think the world really that we were all feeling comparatively prosperous. Things were going quite well. We had the very positive and outgoing Tony Blair's Labour government here. You were in the Netherlands, you were having kind of social conversations in a very interesting way. And I think there was a feeling, and as I said last week, I think it was the last time probably we actually all sort of were feeling quite good about ourselves in the world, at least in the
Well, I
Western
was,
world.
of course, starting to go into kind of more environmental awareness. So I was not feeling so good about all these things. But where were you when 2000 happened?
Oh, I was on the banks of the Thames. I was down with the crowds. I'd also had dinner with friends and Richard, and we walked down from Kennington, I think, down to very just outside the Lambeth Palace, the Archbishop of Canterbury's palace, and stood on the banks of the Thames to watch the fireworks, which were not as good as they should have been. I don't know. There was this huge build up because I think it was the first time that all this fireworks stuff happened around the world and got a lot of, it was all kind of massive TV coverage and people were sailing down the Thames. I can't remember, possibly the Queen, I think, was sailing down the Thames but I can't remember exactly now, but there was a massive amount of
I
there were a
love
massive
how
amount
how
of
you
people.
as an English person, it's sailing because she was certainly not sailing with the wind in
No,
the
oh,
sail,
no, no, none of
right?
that. No,
So this was
no.
motorized
Motoring. Yes. Oh, very
boating
definitely.
with lots of people guarding her, I imagine. But
Exactly,
anyway,
exactly.
yeah.
And fireworks going. I might even have made that up. She might not have been there at all. I'm not sure. Um, but um, but yes, there were huge crowds, and I think it was the first time there was such a big kind of, well, it was after all the new millennium coming in. So we watched that, and then we walked back again, and that that was
So I
that.
remember all of us, she lives on the top floor, and so we all went onto the roof for the fireworks. But there is so much pollution, of course, with fireworks that
Yeah.
very
Oh no, it's
quickly we
awful.
couldn't
Yeah.
see anything. It was just all, smoke, and we just went back down, I think, for dessert. So yes, that was the start of the year 2000.
It was, yes. And then after
Where were
that,
you?
there
Yeah,
were there were some truly dreadful events happened in the next few years. So, I mean, one of them was, of course, 9/11, which happened really quite soon after that. I think
2001.
2001, yes. And I mean, I remember that very clearly. I was driving home from a consultation with I was doing work-life balance consulting with a company in the city, and I was just kind of coming back to near home, and the phone in the car rang. We actually had mobile phones by then. And Richard said, "Where are you? Where are you? You need to come. You need to come and watch. We're watching something terrible on the telly." And I got home within 5 minutes, and the first plane had flown into the tower, and we were just sitting there. Absolutely, we didn't really know what to make of it, I don't think. And I watched as the second plane did it, and it was just the most extraordinary event. It was really hard to know, I think, what to make of it immediately. And I don't think the commentators on the TV who really knew what had happened or who had done what and why. But
Yeah.
you were actually on the spot, weren't you?
Yes, we were in New York. Jos van Merendonk, my husband, my partner, my love, had wanted to kind of bring his work, his paintings, to the attention of American gallery owners. And so he'd rented a studio in Williamsburg, which was just about, that was then still, now it is all gentrified, and that was just about to happen. And so he'd gone to New York like the beginning of September, and I came a few days later. And then we had this little apartment, small apartment on 3rd Street. So that's quite low in Manhattan. Um, and I was part of I mean, how could this have happened in my life? I was part of a delegation to the UN NGO, the annual UN NGO conference
Wow.
that they have. And so on the first day, we had sat in that room with, the green marble, and Kofi Annan had spoken to us. And so the next day would be all about networking, and we had instructions to speak to as many people as we could. So we came out the door, and there was smoke very high up. And Jos immediately said, "That's the World Trade Center." And I was like, and then we saw some people kind of stand in a little clutter, and we went there, and from there you could see the World Trade Center. And a plane, they said, had flown into the first building, and they immediately said, "This is a terrorist action." And I thought, wow, these these Americans jumping to conclusions. So that I was on my way to the UN. So we turned and walked to the subway station that I think is at 11th or 14th Street. So we walked up, and this still, moves me. We felt the impact, physically felt
Wow.
the impact of the second plane hitting, the second building, and we ran back down and could see where it had hit.
Goodness.
And then what?
Then what?
So I
Yeah.
still went to the underground. Jos went to Williamsburg, and and I went to the UN building. And in the underground, you could just see who knew and who didn't know. You know, some people were
Of
kind
course,
of
yeah.
putting on their makeup to go to the office, and other people kind of, we were all there.
Shocked
And
and
then
terrified. Yeah.
yeah, and then we came to the UN building, which is, of course, right on the river there, very conspicuous. So black cars were kind of shooting out of the parking garages, officials needing to
Wow.
be put in safety. And we couldn't enter the building. And somehow we found each other and we walked to the hotel of one of us. And in the lobby, we stood in the lobby when, that the first building kind of crumbled. And
Goodness.
then we sat, what do you do but sit and meditate and feel compassion for everyone involved?
Yeah. Yeah. Goodness, how extraordinary to have been there on the spot while that happened and to actually literally feel it happening and
Feel it in my
see the
body. And I
results.
still, I can't feel that, but I feel moved. And then, of course, at the end of the day, we were on Third Street and I was like on 56. So we walked down, whereas everybody was walking up because the underground had flooded and wasn't
Right.
going. So people were walking up and I was with someone I'd met, walking down. And it's as if, when you're at a funeral, you kind of have this look with look of understanding and grief and empathy with people that you don't know. And it was like that kind of collectively.
Yes, yes, I can imagine. And then what happened? What did you do? Did you stay in New York? Did you
Yeah, we
go
stayed in New
back?
York under 14th Street. It was like closed off. So I was a little worried. I don't really live there. You had to prove, they said you had to prove that you live there in order to, but it wasn't like that at all. And it was actually amazing weather. So, we had dinner outside one of the first days after, and you saw these Verizon cars. I mean, the Americans are very hand-on. They immediately, the next day I thought maybe I can give blood. So I went to a hospital, but they didn't need anything. And I even went in a taxi with someone to a next place. And also I thought, there were lines of people wanting to help in whatever way. But and at the end of the day, I would go. There were a lot of fire stations around where we lived. And so, you had the wreath and of all these firemen who had died helping people to get
Yeah,
out.
yeah,
And I would stand at what is it, Houston Street, where, the workers would come all in grime. And of course, there was this horrible smell of burnt building and everything and everyone in it.
goodness. Yeah,
So yes, it was a really, yeah,
yeah, what an
nice to have
experience.
been there.
Yeah, goodness me.
And then I flew back to Europe because there was a conference of social venture network of these companies that say, companies have a purpose that includes societal and environmental responsibility. And we had a conference, and I was like, I don't know, 7 people to the plane. And none
Wow.
of the
Yeah.
Americans, of course, were coming to the conference because it was all so uncertain. So, yeah, like you said, we did not really know what to make of it
No, no, and one of the effects after that was that Americans just stopped flying, didn't they? I
for a
mean, that was
while.
for a while, yes, yes, absolutely. But they
Yeah,
just really were very, very scared of
yeah,
coming to Europe,
yeah,
coming anywhere. So we saw far fewer Americans in whatever, as tourists and,
yeah,
in business, whatever, in
yeah.
a couple of years, I think, until it sort of settled down and people decided they were safe again or safe enough.
And I was going to America quite a lot because I had entered healing school, Barbara Brennan School of Healing.
Amazing. So what,
So
what were you doing there?
for the next 4 years, 5 times a year, I would go to Miami and have week-long classes in Reiki and psychology. which is the basis of my book about the childhood conclusions. I kind of translated it into childhood conclusions that we kind of build our view of the world and our view of ourselves on, and energy healing.
Fascinating. Yes, your book is really, really interesting. Yes. So, gosh, so
Yeah,
that was quite a lot. That was a long kind of learning process for you then.
it was a long, but I took it kind of year by year.
Yeah.
And yeah, I was quite immersed in studying again. You know,
Yeah. Yes.
when I first thought of it, somebody tipped me and said, this would really be a thing for you to do. And I was like, yes, but I'll be 50, when I graduate. And then this person, of course, said, when you don't do it, how old will you be? Yes, I'll also be 50, hopefully.
That's such a good point. Yes,
Yes.
what a good riposte. Absolutely. Yes. Well, I mean, nothing to do with
So
what we're talking about today, but I did a teaching diploma when I was in my mid 50s, and I thought, oh, I'm too old to do this. But no, it was brilliant. But anyway, we won't get diverted onto that. But I also did quite a lot of traveling in the early years of the 21st century. But I was not traveling to Miami. I was traveling to Russia and back. I think I made 5 trips to Russia and back.
Russia's big. Where in
Russia
Russia
is
did you
big.
go?
So I would fly in, I think I flew into Moscow every time. But the reason I was doing it was to adopt our 2 daughters. So our first daughter came from a children's home in Bryansk, which is actually
So let me backtrack.
okay.
You wanted to adopt, and then how did you get to adopt Russian children?
Yes, well, that's interesting. Well, so when Richard and I discovered that we were not going to have biological children because I was having an early menopause, my mum, who was very involved in the whole sort of world of childcare and caring, she was at one stage the chair of Barnardo's, the chair of the Thomas Coram Foundation. She was involved with an intercountry adoption panel and had met people who were kind of pioneering intercountry adoption, and and I had kind of investigated adopting within the UK, and I was too old. I was just 42, I suppose. I mean, Richard was younger than me. He's 11 years younger than me. But I was considered too old to adopt a baby. And so I thought my feeling was that because we already had, I mean, my 2 boys were in their teens. I thought it would be less disruptive somehow to have a baby with kind of less history, as it were, rather than an older child who would inevitably have been in and out of care and have, a traumatized background. um, so I was kind of discussing this with my mum, and she said, "Well, why don't you do an intercountry adoption?" And so she introduced me to the American agency, and because Britain hadn't signed the Hague Convention, it was all unbelievably complicated. I mean, I don't
It's
think we need.
always the Brits who kind of want to be the exception to everything. I don't really know what the Hague Convention is, but
Well, no, I mean, in a way, I don't either. But it was some piece of a kind of international agreement about being able to adopt or move children between countries. I think that's I think it had
uh-huh.
lots of things, the Hague Convention, but this was a part of it. And we hadn't signed it, but intercountry adoption was sort of starting to be a thing, but we had to go through an American agency. So it was immensely complicated. So first we had to go through the whole social services administration procedure that you do in the UK for any kind of adoption. Then we had to go take all that, and then there was masses of paperwork and interviews with social workers and essays about our backgrounds to write, and investigations into us and our parents, and
Yeah, so
what.
anybody can have a baby, but if you want
Yeah.
to adopt, you go through. So it also is kind of a test to,
Oh,
you must have
absolutely.
really, really wanted this. Can you describe to me that feeling when you're in your 40s and you really, really want you have children and you really, really want children again, because to me, that is very foreign.
Yes, I know you, for someone who never wanted children in the first
I
place.
never really want, no.
In a way, I feel well, Richard is adopted,
Aha.
and my initial kind of, no, not all of it, but part of my reason for wanting to have a family with him was because I kind of felt it would be important to him to have a biological family. And
And
then,
was it? Because you can
well,
think that, but
no,
did he think it was important for him to have a biological family?
it's hard for me to tell at this point whether he was just going along with it because he thought that's what I wanted, or whether he
Oh,
actually,
interesting.
I know. I mean, I'm not sure how much we really unpicked it and discussed it. But then, I'd got on this track of, we were going to have a family. And so, and then, deciding that we would adopt. And Richard was, so because he'd been adopted in a way that felt comfortable to him, I think it felt like, didn't feel particularly
Yeah.
strange. And perhaps in a way it was, I don't know, more natural or easier for him to come to accept. I mean, I don't mean accept and like he didn't want it, but it wasn't a difficult decision. And yet, one of the main reasons for me wanting to do it was completely, kind of out the window when we were talking about adoption and not biological families. But I think I was very much on on an emotional track that we were going to have children. And actually, I have to admit that I'm kind of, I'm very kind of intrigued by new projects, and this very quickly turned into a new and challenging project that I was quite fascinated by the whole kind of structure of it and how it would happen, and and the difficulties of it. And it was difficult. It did take up a lot of time. It was hard work, but I somehow felt that it had to be done. And not that I didn't want to do it, I did want to do it very much, but I also felt that, it needed to happen in some way. And I can't really explain that in
No.
any sort of rational way.
Many, many emotional things we can't fully explain.
Yeah,
So there
exactly.
was tiger, you had something, you'd bitten into something and you
Yes, that's
gonna
exactly
crack
right.
this. You're not
Yeah.
gonna kind of be thwarted by some paperwork, even if
No,
they throw masses at you.
no, no,
But of course,
exactly.
I mean, there's many decisions in between. Are we really going to, go through with this next step? But then, yeah,
Well,
yeah.
somehow
Tell me
every
more.
step that we took kind of got us in deeper, and
Ah,
we sort of
yeah,
very became harder to, not that I wanted to, but I think it would have been, harder to suddenly say, oh, actually, let's not bother, let's not do this. That never
yeah.
kind of came up at any stage. And the people involved were amazing too. I mean, the woman my mother introduced us to, who ran the American agency, who was called she was called the Gare, and she was, yeah, an extraordinary. She had Native American background, and she was so she was on such a mission to help children from other countries who are having a terrible life, and get them into
Hmm.
families. So there were various countries you could choose from to adopt from.
Hmm.
And I thought, because we were already a family, that it would be easier for us and easier for the children we adopted if they were white European. And so Russia was our best option, really. And also, I had done this, as I said last week. I had studied Russian. I had
Yeah.
done Russian through school, so I did feel I had an affinity
Mhm.
with Russia as well. And
And
Richard did as
was that true when you came there? Did you really have an affinity with Russia when you landed in Moscow? And
not particularly, no. I mean, I did. I mean, the arcade. We also went to St. Petersburg, and we did managed to do a tiny bit of sightseeing when we were there. So, and I did, the feel of the language. When you sort of know a language and you
yeah.
feel that you'll have a certain kind of understanding of a culture, I suppose, through language. I suppose that was there. and the Russian literature I'd read, obviously modern Russia is not quite like Tolstoy or Turgenev,
Yeah.
but still it was there was a there was a connection of sorts. Um, so
So you and Richard would go there and
yeah.
then meet with officials from
Yeah,
the
well,
adoption world.
yeah, well, yes, we had a chaperone who and we had people that we stayed with. It was all very domestic level in a way because
Mhm.
we were going to children's homes that were first in Bryansk, which is a small industrial and not particularly attractive town. I was on the outskirts, and then with our second daughter, we went north to somewhere called Petrozavodsk, which was on a huge lake.
So with your second daughter, so tell me about it. You go to a place, there's lots of children there. Have they picked someone
Yes,
out
yes,
for
yes,
you
yes,
to meet?
absolutely. There is the matching process goes on
Yeah.
as part of the kind of administration. So first you have to pass all these tests to say that you're fit to be an adoptive
Yeah.
parent, adoptive parents. And for the UK side of things, it's all about kind of emotional stuff and understanding parenting. And obviously, because I had two children, that was, that was helpful. But with Russia, we had to send them layout plans, architectural plans almost of our house, our finances, and to make sure that we were going to give these children a good life. And we
Yeah, and of
actually,
course, I mean, lots of children are being exported or
yes, yes,
imported for
absolutely.
horrendous, jobs and slavery. And so, yeah,
Yeah, no, no, absolutely. It was just a different take on what made a good family, I
yeah,
suppose, for children to come into. But it was, I mean, it was two extremely bureaucratic countries with, requiring a huge amount of paperwork and everything had to be signed off and by lawyers and sent by courier here, there, and everywhere. It was absolutely, and lots of, every time we went to Russia, we had to get our visas, new visas for our passports.
yeah.
It was hard work in that sense, but kind of
So,
fascinating.
so you went there, and then did you meet
Yes,
a
so we
few
went there the
children?
first
And
time.
then,
Yes, and we couldn't. The Foreign Office here would not let us adopt two children at the same time from the same children's home because they said if they were not biologically connected and there were no sets of sibling children to adopt, then they would have it would be too hard for them to come into a new home and also have to kind of bond with a new sibling as well, which was absolutely ridiculous, in fact. And they changed that later. So anyway, that's why we had to do it twice.
so from the get-go, you wanted two girls,
Not necessarily two girls, but two children.
two
Um,
children.
Yeah, and with the matching process, both times we were matched with a girl, so that's why we
Yeah,
didn't particularly pick. Because actually, if you then start to be picky about what kind of child you want, it takes even longer. I mean, it took
yeah.
2.5 years for our first daughter to get through the kind of admin process.
Yeah.
And then we when all that had been done and we were we'd kind of seen photos and
And
video.
how old was she then?
She was 9 months when we were matched with
Oh,
her.
wow. So you didn't really meet a person, you met a baby.
Yeah, oh yes, yes, absolutely. Yeah. And so the first time we went out to meet her and we stayed in Moscow and then we took the overnight train to Bryansk and which is a whole kind of experience in itself. Russian overnight trains, extraordinary. And it was winter, it was snowy, it was we were traveling through this countryside that was, white countryside. And then we went to the children's home, which was depressing to say the least. I mean, they're not well funded. They are full of, lots of children, not that many, not enough carers,
Hmm.
people with the best of intentions, but, everything is very
Yeah.
regimented and literally there is not enough for them to eat. I mean, when we sat with them while they were being given a meal and they cried, the children, when the food ran out, they cried because they were still hungry. I mean, it was yeah. And so then we met. We kind of went to see our first daughter. two or three times at the children's home, and then we had to go home, and then we had to come back again a couple of months later, or yeah, something like that, and adopt her in court. And that was an extraordinary experience too. Obviously, we were with a chaperone who was also our translator, and there were judges. They were all women, judges and advocates, and they had this extraordinary conversation while we were in the midst of our court case, and our chaperone was putting the case for us to be parents, and they were having a conversation about a TV program they'd watched the night before about how children were being trafficked and sold for their
Oh.
inner organs. And
Oh,
so we were sort of up against this TV series. I
yeah.
mean, of course, it all went through in the end, and it was fine. But it was really quite a scary process, to be told that what they were talking about was human trafficking, and were they going to? And it could have, they could have said, no, you can't adopt this child, and it would all have been for nothing.
Yeah.
But then she it went through, and then we went back and collected her and took her home, and that was
Wow. So she was
amazing.
a 1 year old
By the
then,
time we got home, when we collected her, she was 11 months by then.
11 months by then.
Yeah, but tiny, so undernourished. I mean, not skinny, but just hadn't grown. She looked like probably a 7 or 8 month old Western child, baby. And when we first took her to the doctor, they said, "Oh, she'll always be very tiny, and she's lost all this kind of time when she should have had good food
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah,
nourishment."
yeah.
They were completely
The
wrong.
first
She's
1,000 days are so
yeah,
important.
yeah, they are,
Yeah.
but she's now 5'10", and she's a very.
Oh, I don't know what that means,
Oh
Lucy.
no, sorry. Well, no, I can't. I really can't convert
No,
that. But
but
it's
she's
it's
tall.
a decent sized man is 5'10",
Okay.
so she's tall, and she's yeah,
Yeah.
right. So then we had to do it all again for our second child.
So,
Going
and she is tall, and that is because you started to nourish her well and care
Yes,
for her
yes.
well. And yeah, yeah.
And then we had to do it all again. And they kept changing the rules. So we went twice the first time. The second time we had to go three times. And it, just got increasingly complicated. But we did it, and it has been an
So
amazing.
again, and your second daughter, was she also a baby when you adopted?
She was a little bit older. She was 18 months when she came home,
Uh-huh.
but also very backwards. She couldn't walk. And so yes, she needed a lot of sort of extra care. And I mean, as soon as they both came back, they were both hungry. They ate. They just wanted to develop and walk, and
Yeah.
it
Yeah,
was
that's amazing about, us as little beings that
yeah,
we want to grow. And yeah, so at 18 months, she couldn't walk. I only know the walking happens because we were with the whole family once on a holiday, and my eldest niece started to kind of use the table to stand. Her birthday is 1st of April, and I think this was a Christmas holiday, so it must have been at kind of 9 months that she started to stand up and then walk. So
yeah.
otherwise, it's so interesting how I have no clue
No, no,
whatsoever.
no
But
sense of
not
this.
walking at 18 months, and then did she pick that up easily or?
Yes, yes. I mean, I can't remember how long it took now, but kind of maybe a few weeks, a couple of months, and she was
Yeah.
up and walking and moving along. So yes, it was
So in your mid 40s, you were having babies in the house again
again, yes,
and
again.
toddlers and little ones. Whereas I was kind of studying our childhood conclusions and go like, what conclusions have we jumped to? Like, I don't belong, I'm not enough, I
Yes. So
shouldn't, I should keep my creativity and my anger in. I should be in control. I should be perfect. Those are basically the five conclusions that we jumped
yeah,
to.
so what are just run through the five conclusions. What are they?
So I just said, like, I don't belong.
Oh, I
I don't
see. Sorry.
belong
Yeah.
with this family, but maybe I don't even belong on earth. I'm like a spiritual being, and I'm not enough. I should be. I keep my creativity and my anger
Yeah.
and, people crossing my boundaries, and I should just swallow. I should be in control. I should be perfect. And that's kind of the conclusions. But you can also say we come with five amazing gifts. And one is, the connection to a larger consciousness than just the body. And very often people who think they don't belong also have like a helicopter view and can kind of make connections that others don't even see. And the ones who don't think they're enough and that there isn't enough, which is most of us. But if you're really into that conclusion, very often you're also very verbal, and also you do a lot because you think it's never enough. So it's very people like that. You can do a bit more,
Yes.
and also you can do a lot. And then the creativity of the ones whose boundary was crossed, they turn into very caring people who care, who see where there's a need and try to, help everyone. And the ones who want to be in control become amazing managers and are passionate lovers and are very passionate people because that's the wounding happens through their heart. So, they have the big heart. And the ones that are think, I ought to be perfect is like, again, a boundary thing. It's like as a child, you crossed a boundary, but you didn't know it was there. And so this can happen at a later stage when you kind of press against your father. And suddenly, as a girl, your father says, no, 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 no. And you go like, what happened yesterday? This was all right. And now what's happened here? And you conclude that you're a kind of an amoral person, so you should be very upright. And
Wow.
that comes with this sense of what is wrong and right. And so it all has its advantages and its life path. And the whole thing about it and what we learned, what I was learning in healing school in Miami while you were traveling to Russia is, can we have these patterns instead of the patterns having us? And kind of these endless thoughts of, oh, I'm not enough, I don't belong, everybody belongs, but you're at a party and you can't really find a person to talk to, and you go into this whole spiel of how it's so easy for everybody but you. And
That's me. That's me at parties.
so that is you, yes, so and then to discover that we all have that to a certain degree.
Yeah. So
And
are
that
they on a spectrum then? Are each of the five conclusions something that we all have concluded to a greater or a lesser degree? Or are
yeah,
some people
yeah,
just, two of them
identify more
amazing?
with one than the other.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that must have
that's
been
true.
very interesting for you personally to self-analyze.
It was. It was. I said to yours, is like going to the chimney sweep, because this channel needs to be open so I can really tune into other people and really listen and channel the energy. And so the chimney sweep, each of the 5 times for the 4 years I went to Miami, I would come back and go like, oh my God. So it was a real gift to examine the inner life, and also that's why I wrote a book, because this was all, this is a theory by Wilhelm Reich, who was an early psychiatrist, and he kind of noticed that people coming into his office with the same kind of complaints or problems or issues, and he would look at their bodies and hear their stories and kind of connect it to and came to this, which I have much simplified in the childhood conclusions because that is what they are. But I thought, I'm 50 or going on 50. Why do I hear this only now? This is a wonderful map of the inner world. Why did I talk about this when I was 15, 25, 35 with friends who, we were all just finding it out by ourselves? So that was my reason for writing the book.
That's wonderful. And did it change how so for example, you have talked about how you suffered from depression. Did this new understanding of yourself, did that do anything to alleviate the depression or change how you
Yeah.
felt about yourself and the world?
Yeah, I mean, it helped, of course, because I had no chart of the inner world. And I think we need maps. We have Google Maps all the time when we go somewhere, but when we have a reaction, when we're triggered and we have a reaction of any kind, then then what is it? Where does it come from? How can we not just wait it out as I would do with the depression, but how can I really work with it and
Mm,
liberate it and
yes.
keep flowing so, it can at some point resolve itself.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
And
it was
actually, I really like what you say about creating maps. I mean, that's what all your books are. They're
yeah,
maps to, so
yeah,
the childhood conclusions, maps to where we are when we get started. The
yeah,
eldest daughter effect is the map of a kind of route map and an understanding, a geographical
yeah.
point of where eldest
The
daughter
birth
fall in
order.
the family. Yeah, yeah, exactly. No.
So I want to promote it on my website, which is lisetteschuitenmaker.com. There's a test for the childhood conclusions, and you can do that,
Oh,
and
I
you
will
can
do
just,
that.
see where am I at? What is a conclusion that I have drawn? So what must also be my qualities?
Yeah,
What qualities have I developed because of that? And how can I use them better? And how can I see the pattern when it is
fantastic.
triggered? When I feel like a victim or I feel I should be in control
Mm.
of everything. What is,
So if you do that test, do you get a little report back?
yeah,
Does it? Fantastic.
yeah.
Oh, well, let's put that. We'll definitely put that in the show notes so people and in the on the social media posts so people can go and do that. And let's see if you get some interest. I'm certainly going to do it. I absolutely love kind of little
Yeah.
personality analysis and all that. I will always do it. I'm always hooked.
Yes, now I will finally find out who I am.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Have you got one for eldest daughters as well? That would be a
Well, you're an eldest
yeah,
daughter, but
yeah, no,
yeah,
but
no, I don't
yeah,
have a
different.
test for that. I
No,
just
no,
have,
just showing up
the
which
book
parts
and
of
then the
can I show you a
accompanying.
map that I've recently written as well, and I've just got the proof copies for.
Oh, wow.
Uh,
Oh, wow, Lucy.
so that's my
Congratulations.
latest and last book about how to write books. So, but I've yeah, no, it doesn't officially launch till next month. But yes,
Well done, you.
I'm really pleased with this one. Actually, I think it kind of distills everything that I know and have experienced about helping people to write books into that. Oh yes, no,
Yeah, so here's the childhood conclusion. I don't
fantastic.
really like the cover at all. It's as if, you are a wooden person and then you're still a wooden person. But we've gone through so many iterations that, yeah, at some point they said this is just going to be it, Lisette.
Yes.
So, but I think the book is much more useful and much better than the cover shows.
Yeah, yes. Book covers, we can talk about book covers another
Oh,
time.
endlessly.
But
Yay. But it
oh,
is so interesting that, you were going back and forth to Russia and find your children. And I was going back and forth to Miami and find myself and in a way my new life.
and yes, yes,
We both
absolutely.
had a new
Well,
life, after 45.
yeah, yeah. I think it's I think between 40 and 50 is a very interesting and malleable period of your life. I think lots of people kind of rediscover themselves in different ways and yeah,
We used
obviously
to call
we
it midlife
that's why
crises.
we call it midlife crisis, of course, yes. But I think there should
Yeah,
be
I
a
didn't
nicer
really
name
perceive
for
it
it
as a
rather than
crisis.
crisis. It should be something else. Midlife magic or
Yes.
something.
Book magic, midlife magic. It's all magic. Okay.
Oh, well, so much for having discussed the events of the early 21st century. We've talked about some very interesting stuff and what we were doing.
Yes, and I never really asked, about this adoption process and how that was. And also, yeah, I'm still curious how it is suddenly to have babies again. But
Well,
we'll talk more. We'll talk again next week.
we will indeed, and yes, and we'll put those links in the notes as well, so everybody can go and take your test.
Great.
Okay, goodbye for now.
Bye.
Bye, Lisette.